Okay, every once in a while I've done this and I trust it, even though I don't see why I should ever trust this. And that is, I'm going to go into this without knowing where it's going to go.
One of those.
Right. It's a form of improv. There was once I think it was a radio lab where they focused on these guys who do improv, where they really don't know what's going to happen. They just start a conversation with each other and it just goes somewhere. And and it is reliably entertaining. It's reliably entertaining, and when they talk to them, it's like they have this theory that the story's out there and they just have to sort of allow it to come forward or something like that. They trust the process. So this was something I did a lot more a few years ago, called it Torah Improv. And that's just because there's some kind of special energy when we get together and we're all sort of combining our attention and it I think takes things somewhere where I couldn't get to on my own.
It was created by a Chicago Jew. Viola Spolin was the one who started the improv games that eventually
And that's where
became
comedy. That's where
eventually became the
what was she
Second
called?
City.
Oh, Second City.
Yeah, but she was the mother of it in the 30s.
Really?
The
Viola
Spolin.
Spolin.
Yes.
Nice. Thank you for that.
There
I
you
did
go.
not know that information. Thank you for that. Okay, so here's the thing. The daughters of Tzlafchad approach Moshe. What is their this is in this week's Torah portion. What is their argument? Their argument is, why should our father's name be lost? The daughters of Tzlafchad, King ben Chefer, ben Gilad, ben Machir, ben Menashe, from the families of Menashe ben Yosef, came close. Vatikravna, which interestingly is a nice juxtaposition to Korach. Vayikach Korach. Korach steps back. He steps back into Machlokes. They come close, which is an indication right away that that they are interested in this for God's sake, for to do the right thing. Dr. Aviva Zornberg speaking on To Be or Not to Be, A Tale of Five Sisters. Right up there. That's our poster. Anyway, so they approach, and what is their claim? Lama yigra shem avinu mitov mishpachto. Why should our father's name be yigra itself? Garua means less or on the when you want to say something's garua, it has less quality. But here it means like be removed. They seem to be arguing for the preservation of their father's name. That's their argument. Our preservation of our father's name. And it struck me when I was thinking about it today that it's very similar to Yibum, the levirate marriage. What is the purpose of levirate marriage? If a man dies without children, then he yeah, the brother takes his wife and steps into his brother's shoes to preserve the man's name, So a person's name seems to be very important. They're not just while we're alive, it seems to be important even after we die. God says in what is the Torah for fast days? Public fast, right? It's from Isaiah 55:6 to 56:8. And at one point, Benasati lahem bevesi ubechomosai, and I will place for them in my house and within my walls, Yad Vishem Tov Mibanim Umibanos, a hand and a good name. Shem Olam Etenlo, I will give him an everlasting name, Asher Lo Yikares, which will not be cut off. An everlasting name. This is something that we strive for, and that apparently our children should strive for, to preserve our name, that there's some notion of everlasting name. What is frustrating is that if you look at Yibum cases, there are several cases in throughout Tanakh of Yibum-like cases. They're modeled after Yibum. They're modeled after Yibum. One is with Yehuda and Yehuda's children, where he has apparently Tamar is the reason that Er was her first husband. He dies. Then Onan, his brother, marries her or steps into the relationship with her. That's Yibum. Then he dies. Then there's Shelah, who is a third son, who is very young, and she's supposed to wait until he does Yibum with her. That there is a Yibum-like process going on over there. There is a Yibum-like process going on with Ruth. When Boaz eventually marries Ruth, he is stepping in to her husband's shoes, which I think her husband was Machlon. It was either Machlon or Kilian. I think her husband was Machlon. So they are not classic Ibum scenarios. Well, let's put it this way. The Ruth one is not a classic Ibum scenario. The one with Yehuda's does sound like it's very Ibum-like, very Ibumish. It's obviously before the Torah. Um, the thing is, though, that in none of these cases where you see the Ibum cases, do you see anybody named for the person whose name is being preserved. If you look at the name of what's the name of Ruth's child? Oved. Oved is not Machlon. If you're saying that you're preserving the name, why isn't he given the name of him? In the case of Yehuda, the children are Peretz and Zorach. They're twins. They're not Onan. They're not. They're not. There's no. There does not appear, and it does not appear to be a requirement. If you look at the laws of Yibum, there seems to be no requirement to name the first issue of that union now, of the Yibum union. There doesn't seem to be any requirement that they name the child after the parent. So what does it mean to preserve the name in Yibum? And also over here, what would be the scenario? The father's name is Tzlofchad. Okay. They want to have his name preserved in the land. If you travel Israel, every inch of Israel, will you find land of Tzlofchad? How did they preserve the name of Tzlofchad with the land? Especially because if they had been sons, if they had been sons, so the land would be divvied up amongst the sons. And now the land would be called after the sons. And then if grandchildren, great grandchildren going down the line, how is the name preserved in the land? The name ends up getting preserved because they petition and his name gets into the Torah. That's how the name gets preserved. But uh, when you talk about Yad Vashem is named after that verse in Yeshayahu, in Isaiah. It's the Jewish people in Israel's attempt to preserve the legacy, at the very least, house a place that has the names of the people that died so they don't die anonymously, right? And so there's some place where all those names, or as many of those names, is preserved as possible in this place, preserving the names. That's how we interpret it. So there, a historian could look 1,000 years from now and be able to find uh, names of people that died during that thing. You could say that that's an example of preserving a name. But how does Yibum do it? After those children are born, a couple generations, nobody's going to know about the Yibum that happened back then. And even if they go through their yichus, like he's going to go, like they did with Slavchad. So they called Slavchad, his name was Slavchad, the son of Chefer, the son of Gilad, the son of Machir, the son of Menashe, from the families of Menashe. By the way, what is going on over there? At the end of we've been studying in a women's class, we've been studying we Maseh, the Torah portion of Maseh, Matos and Maseh. So the very last narrative of the Torah is the conquest, the dividing up of Israel, and then some of the capturing of the towns while Moshe is still alive. And one of the final towns that's captured is by Mocher, the son of Menashe. And he captures Gilad. Rabbi Foreman considers this the final piece in the Joseph story. It's really the final piece in the Jacob and Esav story, what he calls goats and coats, because Gilad, he suggests, is Gal-Aid, the town where Lavan makes uh, a a covenant with Yaakov. Now, uh, and he suggests that that was a dramatic, terrible moment. It may be what the Haggadah means when it says, Arami Oved Avi, my father was a wandering Aramean, is how we usually translate it. But that's not how the Haggadah translates it. The Haggadah translates it as an Aramean sought to kill my father. And who is Lavan? Lavan Bikesh Lavor Zakol. Lavan wanted to destroy everything. So where do you see that Lavan tried to destroy everything? So you could say that it's because when he was chasing after Yaakov, he uh, he was planning on wiping everybody out, which is often how it's taught. But it could be that it has to do with this post-covenant thing, that there were elements in this covenant thing that would lead to the destruction of the family of Yaakov. How would that be? because not only is Rochel die because of the Lavan showing up over there, but also Yosef, he wanted to suggest. It wasn't just Rachel who's going to be ended, but everything that comes from Rachel, which includes Yosef. Without Yosef, the Jewish people would not have been able to continue in Egypt. Yosef is the secret of the when it comes to the battle with Esav. Yaakov Eish, Yosef Lahava. Yaakov is the candle or the fire, but Yosef is the flame, and Esav is Kash. That's what it says in the book of Ovadia, the book of Ovadia. Um, so so how does so what does this have to do with anything? Because the caravan that takes Yosef to Egypt, or at least it looks like that's the caravan that takes Yosef to Egypt, comes from Gilad. It says it comes from Gilad. So he understands that to mean that this whole business of Yosef going down to Egypt is because of Gilad, is because of Gal-Aid. And so when Machir, the son of Menashe, who is a son of Yosef, ends up conquering Gilad, it's like that's the end of the story. That's the end of everything. It's done. It's just he has a son. He actually names his son Gilad. He doesn't just conquer Gilad. He names his son Gilad. Anyways, Slavchad is the son of Chefer, son of Gilad, son of Machir, son of Menashe. Um, so he is remembered because he is so mentioned in the Torah. Like if you or I would say our names, we don't go back to every name that ever existed. So if we did that, if we went all the way back to Adam using our names, then you could say that we preserved the person's name, that having a child preserved the person's name. Because this child is going to be called eventually, there's a child called after this person. But we don't necessarily even do that. Who is Oved's father? Boaz. We don't know. It was Machlon. Were Machlon and Kilion from the tribe of Yehuda? I don't know if they were from the tribe. If they were from the tribe of, yes, they were. Oh, they were from the tribe of Yehuda because Bethlehem is in Yehuda. So Machlon and Kilion were from the tribe of Yehuda also. The reason I'm bringing it up is because the King David is from the tribe of Yehuda. King David is a descendant of Ruth, and which means he's descendant of Boaz. Is usually how they do it when they go through his thing. They go through Boaz. They don't mention Machlon or Kilion. When they go back and do David's lineage, it does work out that Machlon was from Yehuda also, but which makes sense because Boaz is his relative and he's doing a relative's kind of yibum. So how do you preserve their name? What does it mean to preserve their names? And how is this it's both land and children. That's how the name is preserved. These are the two places where you talk about preserving a person's name. You preserve the name with their land, and you preserve their name with a child, having a child. Now, maybe you'll say it's not talking about forever. It's just like having done something that leaves a mark in this world. That you're leaving some kind of legacy in this world. So the fact that there was a child born because of you is a legacy, is some kind of legacy, which hopefully will be continued. Um, So maybe that's what it means. It means just that there's some kind of legacy. And the same would be with the land. The land will continue after this person, and he's part of the chain of how this land has been handled or managed. And it doesn't literally mean will his name be known? Is there going to be a book of record that contains his name? It simply means that he has left a mark in this world, something that um, would be an expression of of him. Also, their argument here, the Tzlafchad, they're not going to preserve their own names. I mean, their names get preserved because of the Torah, but they're not arguing for the preservation of their own names. They're arguing for the preservation of their father's name. And Yibum, it preserves the dead husband's name. It doesn't preserve the wife's name. So if this is so important, so essential, why is it only essential for men? Who's going to be considered typically the owner of the property? It's going to be the master of the property, is going to be a man. Who are we concerned about a legacy, a name? The husband. If the husband dies and they didn't have children, now we have an institution set up in order to preserve his name. There's a mention in Pirkei Avos, Tov Shem Mishem Tov. A name is good, or a good name is better than a fine perfume or fine oils. And it's an opportunity to reflect on a person's name or reputation. My grandmother gave me a little plaque when I was young. I was a teenager, and it had like the name Kirsch on it, and then it was a poem about the responsibility of maintaining that name without, messing it up. You've got a legacy that you're carrying with you. I mean, but that's some kind of last name. Now, I have this last name for as long as I'm alive, then I'm not going to have this last name anymore, and other people are going to have the last name. So it's like you're carrying the name with you. With the last name, it's like you're carrying the name with you. You have responsibility for the name while you're alive, and then you pass it on to somebody else, and they have the name now in their hand. It's like um, when Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Lord Jonathan Sachs, yes,
name will go on.
right. Even there, the name goes on with the boys, not with the girls. That's the Western convention for last names, which is a relatively modern phenomenon in most of the world to have last names. But Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote an essay which is included in his Haggadah. The Haggadah, they have a section of essays, and then they have the Haggadah itself with commentary. So one of the essays was actually a lecture that he gave at Windsor Palace. It was Prince Philip at the time, Queen Elizabeth's husband, was the royal in that was attending, and it was some kind of, it was either in his honor or a previous uh, um, person in his position's honor that this lecture was given, and was given at Windsor Palace. And he began the lecture by talking about how English monarchs have this responsibility that monarchs around the world shared, which is that for a brief time, they hold the monarchy. They like hold the monarchy. And the monarchy in England is not simply a title, but it's also buildings. There's castles, and there's jewels, and there's traditions, and they are responsible for the maintenance of those. It was well described in The Crown, certain elements of this, like the responsibility that people felt around the Queen for the preservation the of the of the crown of the crown. And a big part of it was doing things as they had been done before. But and also I've come back to that a few times, the insistence that she is no longer the private person, Elizabeth, who she was before she became queen. Now that she's queen, she is the queen of England, Elizabeth, the queen
Embodiment
of
of England.
of the monarchy.
Yeah.
And her personal life needs to be as minimal as possible. And her job is to uphold and project the monarchy while she has it. And then she's going to pass it on to the next person, who's Charles, and then it becomes his responsibility, and he's going to pass it on, as have people been doing. And again, so that's like you could see something like that gets passed down and passed down, passed down. Last names, maybe you could see that. It gets passed down, it gets passed down, it gets passed down. But names, just regular, like your name, like how does that? They're not talking about last names. They're talking about Boaz. They're talking about Oved. They're talking about somebody's name. People had one name. It wasn't just Madonna. People had one name in those days. You were Yaakov. And then you could be the son of somebody, the son of somebody, the son of somebody. So unless you want to say that that chain of the son of somebody's is like a last name, if you want to say that, it's like a last name. So there's also this term. I don't know if it exists in other languages. It might exist in Yiddish, but in English, Jews, I think from the early part of the 1900s, had this notion of my Kaddish. Who's going to say Kaddish for me? And they sometimes called the person their Kaddish. I've heard it done even by some people today. Like there was somebody who lamented he he had three beautiful daughters with beautiful families and wonderful grandchildren and a great legacy. But it bothered him toward the ends of life. Who's going to say Kaddish for him? He doesn't have a Kaddish. You know, so is that what they're, is that a form of preserving a person's name? The fact that there is somebody to say Kaddish for the person, because it sounds like they're not just lamenting whatever spiritual benefit Kaddish has. They're lamenting the fact that that person saying Kaddish is a continued uh, a, a continuity of their life, so to speak. And when there's Yortzeit for them and there's Yizker for them, yeah, it's like you're keeping the person going, but you're only keeping the person going for that generation. After that, people aren't, maybe you have grandchildren that are observing a Yortzeit. If you were
My son does the Yortzeit
for your grandchildren,
my
in our family,
Yeah.
now there are grandchildren that remind the whole family of the various Yortzeits, the earlier Yortzeits. But even then, it only goes one generation. It's my father's family and his wife's family that are the ones that get the Yortzeits mentioned. My father's grandfather is not mentioned. My father's father is mentioned. My father's mother is mentioned. They preserve that, but they're not preserving my father's grandfather or my father's great grandfather, etc. And if you go to a cemetery, it's one of the things we try to do with the headstones. What?
If you went that far back in the family, you'd be doing it every day.
Right there. If you go to a cemetery, um, so who visits the graves? The children,
And the spouses.
right? Do grandchildren visit a grave? I do have a great-great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, my father's mother's mother's mother, who's buried on Har HaZeisim, Sarah Rivka Tuchmacher.
I like that name.
She eventually moved to Israel. She's buried on Har HaZeisim, and we know where the grave is. And I've gone with my father there. My father's cousin has gone there. He even fixed up the grave. And whenever I go to Har HaZeisim, like on tours, I sort of know where it is. I don't go to the actual grave, but there's like a tree right near it, and I always see the tree. So I remember her, but it's not that normal for even grandchildren to go to a cemetery. So we feel like if there's a headstone, then there's a memorial to the person. But for who? Let's say it really worked. Let's say you did, there's a family named Maimon. The family named Maimon claimed to be descendants of the Rambam. They don't just claim to be the descendants of the Rambam. They have records of if from father to son, all the way back to the Rambam. And there are people under the chuppah at their wedding where every generation is listed from the Rambam to this person under the chuppah. I know somebody who was at a wedding like that, where every person was mentioned, that whole line was mentioned. Let's say you did that. Let's say you did that. Who are you doing it for? How many people does it get preserved for? 1, 10, 100? There are billions of people on this earth that never heard of this person and they heard of the Rambam, but for almost anybody in between, nobody's heard of them. And nobody's going to hear about them. This guy's family will, well, once or twice in a lifetime or whatever. I don't know how many sons they have. In a lifetime, they'll go over it, and all these names will be gone through for a split second in a list of things, only for a few people that are gathered there. What is the benefit of that? What does it mean to preserve the name? It's not like I'm going to be like the Rambam. I'm not going to be on the lips of people in a generation. I'm not on the lips of people now. What does it mean what is even let's say you do have a preservation of your name. There's a piece of land somewhere that you are connected to, that you have some kind of legacy relationship that, going forward. Let's say that exists. How many people are going to go near that land? There could be a grand total of 100 people ever went near that land. 1,000 people out of the history, out of billions and billions of people in history. What was the benefit of that? Why is that beneficial? And also, we're talking about in this world. Why does this world matter so much? Why does it matter if you make a difference in this world? Why does it matter? This world is not, in our understanding of how things work. By this world, we mean what we call olam hazeh, which is a temporary experience of the soul. It's not the only place the soul inhabits. It's not the only context for the soul. And when it's compared to what we call olam haba, the future world, it's considered to be deficient in almost every way. The one advantage this world has over the next world is that you can do mitzvahs here, which you can't do in a future world. So that which is a very important advantage. But if you compare the two worlds, they say like one second, one bit of fragrance from the world to come is more than anything in this world. Why is it so important to leave a legacy here? Why does it matter? What you do matters. I get that in this world. The choices that you make. What are you going to be judged on? What am I going to be judged on? We're going to be judged on the choices we make. It's our job to make the best choices possible, and then we're going to move on. Why? What is why is it so important that we left a name here? I once asked, I've brought this up before. It's slightly depressing when I bring it up, but I still bring it up. My Zippy and I had a baby that lived for a day. The baby lived for a day. My wife uh, uh, gave birth. It was a C-section. The baby was taken from her and immediately taken to a different hospital because the hospital she was in, Miskavladach, did not have a NICU, and the baby needed to go to a NICU. Shaarei Tzedek Hospital had a NICU, so the baby is taken in an ambulance. I went in the ambulance with the baby, and I was there with the doctors. They're applying, because the baby's lungs were not fully formed, and they're applying oxygen all the way to the NICU at Shaarei Tzedek. I spent a day with the baby, not even a full day with the baby, and then the baby died. So I got to spend time with the baby. I held the baby. The head of the NICU at that time was one of my closest friends. He's still one of my closest friends. It was a bizarre Russian novel, the whole thing. But what happened was when I go back empty-handed to my wife in Miskavladach, and I have to tell her the baby died. And she had no connection to the baby. I mean, she had the baby inside of her, but she had no connection to the baby after it was born. It was immediately taken from her from a C-section. I don't even know if they gave her I doubt if they gave her the baby to hold because they were concerned about the baby breathing. So she had no connection to the baby. And so the social worker at the hospital, this is not a good situation on many levels. But one of the things that's not good is that if she never saw the baby or held the baby, it can be like a special kind of trauma because where if she at least it's the benefit we get from burying a person and see the person buried in the ground. It's like an end. We understand the finality of what's happened and we have a possibility of moving on. But if they don't, the concern of the social worker was if she didn't have anything to do with the baby, the story's not going to end for her. She needs something. So she suggested two things. She suggested that we visit the morgue and they let Zippy hold the baby from the morgue. And the other thing was that the baby be buried in a cemetery with a headstone, with a funeral. So they bury all the baby. They bury even miscarriages. They bury them in the ground. The Chevra Kadisha takes care of it. They even name them. Like I happen to name her. It was on a Shabbos. It was a girl. I was on Shabbos, and I went in Shaarei Tzedek. They have a minyan. They have davening. So I went down to Shaarei Tzedek during laning. I named her because that's when you name a baby usually. And I thought this way I could daven for her with her name. So she had a name. I remember when I told the Chevra Kadisha, they laughed. It was like a weird moment. I told the Chevra Kadisha she has a name. I named her and I told them the name, and they sort of laughed at the moment, which I'm not sure what it was about because I know they name. I've been told another Chevra Kadisha guy told me they name them, even if you don't name them. Not only that, if it's a boy, they give him a bris. Somebody circumcises him, even if he's not even 8 days old. Even if he's not 8 days old, even if he was born, they give him a bris if he's a boy. And they give him a name and they bury them. But they don't tell the parents where they bury them. You don't know. So she was saying that you need to have you should have that. So you should have that. So I called Moshe Shapiro, blessed memory. And he was like, it was the equivalent of slapping me across the face. Like, wake up. This is ridiculous. Over the phone, he was saying, he said, do not do this. This is the wrong thing to do. And part of his statement was, this was a soul that had needed to come back to this world just for a little something. It came back and did what it did, but it had no interaction in this world. It doesn't, a matzeva, a headstone would be would be inappropriate because we have headstones for people that lived here and made a difference here. This baby did not make a difference here. It came down for its own tikkun and then went. Obviously, it affected my life, but it didn't make it wasn't here to leave a mark. But it sounded like, from what he was saying, that there is such a thing, that most of us are leaving some kind of mark here, and it matters. That we live here, and that's one of the reasons we deserve a matzeva, some kind of a headstone that will mark that we lived. And who, even though who's going to visit that matzeva, even after the person dies, how many people visit it? And then the next generation, who's visiting? Nobody. For the rest of the time that matzeva is around, nobody's going to care unless you have some great-great-grandchild who's into genealogy or something. It has something to do with that. It has something to do with a mark that we leave in the world. And women, I'm going to suggest that women somehow are automatically leaving this mark, and men have to, like for men, there's certain manly ways that we leave our mark in the world. You know, they
bring you into the
right, and that's possibly a child was born to Naomi, is what was said in at the end of Ruth. A child was born to Naomi. Like Naomi, the birth is like is connected to her. And yeah, so it's possible that has something to do with it. That with men, it has to do with sons and land.
Rabbi,
It's about sons and
I
land.
just,
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
just thought of something
yeah.
that the daughters of Zlofchad accomplished what they wanted because everyone knows Zlofchad. It's
I
the
know.
one name we
Yeah,
don't
in the
forget.
Torah. I know. In the Torah, and they're, even though their names are given, their names are
Yes.
given here.
Yes.
But we don't remember them by their name. Their names are there. We remember them, but we don't remember them by their names. We just call them the daughters of Zelophehad. Yeah, they accomplished that by getting into the Torah. But there were millions of people that lived during the time of the Torah that are not in the Torah.
I know.
A few people got their name in the Torah. So getting your name in the Torah is not this for some reason. You would think it would be. But if getting your name in the Torah is it, then even being a wicked person, some people got their name in the Torah because they're wicked.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Yeah, Balaam. In the last
Right.
last parsha, Balaam is called Balaam of Russia, Balaam the wicked. And he gets his name immortalized in the Torah. Yeah, so even that is an interesting thing in the mix here. So, yeah, so what is it? So far, if we have to recap, it has to be more than just the mention of the name, because in these cases, there is no guarantee the name will be mentioned a generation or two later. It can't just be that the name is always going to be mentioned. It can't be that the name is immortalized in some ledger, because that doesn't, there is no ledger that we have. You have it in Yad Vashem, but you don't have a ledger for the living. We have a ledger for the ones who died, but you don't have a ledger for the ones that are living. There's no place housing the ledger for the living. So it can't be that, the name, and also with the land. In 3 generations or 4 generations, nobody's going to remember the first person who had that land. They're going to remember the people now who had that land. Maybe the one before them, maybe 2 before them. That's it. So it can't mean that the name is going to be on people's lips. That can't be what it's talking about. So it has to mean something like legacy, that the person has made some kind of impact in this world that has made a difference in this world, even if it's not even recognized anymore, it's still there. Like like if we could look at somebody's life today, and we could follow all the impact, the streams of people's lives that were required for this person to even exist. If we could see it all, then we'd see a stream that goes back to this person, because without that person, this person couldn't exist. So it has to be something like that, that you've made some kind of lasting difference in this world just by being here in some kind of way. Now, if that's the case, Slavchad was here. Why does it add that he has to have land or he has to have male children? If it's just about the legacy of your being, the legacy of your being would happen just because he lived, and they live, and their children live. So if it was just about that kind of legacy, then what do you need the land or male sons for either? You There's something there. There's definitely something there. When we talk about God's names, it's a whole nother subject. All right. I feel like we didn't score a first down. We moved the ball a few feet, so we didn't score a first down, but it helped me talk out the issues so far. And I look forward to thinking about this into the future. What is the deal? As Jerry Seinfeld would say, what is the deal with Yibum and property and land property? All right. I'm very grateful that you gave of your time to listen to these meanderings. And I look forward to sharing more energy with you guys, your energy mixed with my energy next week as we explore next week's parsha. Be well.